Good Friday morning, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to Real Talk here on the I Love CVille Network. We are live in Charlottesville, the Commonwealth, the country, and the world, folks, and we have a fantastic program lined up for you. Of course, Real Talk today presented by our friends at ISC, Intrastate Service Company, for over 60 years, proudly serving the Charlottesville, Albemarle County, and Central Virginia community. We are powered by the good people at Sigora Solar. And I'll tell you what, I'm super excited for this program for a number of reasons. Not only do we have some big-time influencers in this community, Supervisor Diantha McKeel is in the house for her second rodeo. Ted Rieck, who I just really enjoy, the new CEO of Jaunt, we're about to introduce the community to. And most importantly, our good buddy Keith Smith is back. Bronzed,
back in the house.
New glasses.
Semi-new glasses.
Semi-new glasses.
Semi-new glasses. If you remember the story on the last Friday, or last show, we did how I lost my glasses. So these are my makeup glasses. They're my reading glasses. I cannot see either one of you. So
in that case, that's good.
No, that is not true.
Not true.
I specifically asked the director to have you sit next to me so I can see you.
He did, and we said okay because you have to keep this guy in check over here, and that's no easy task. Judah Wickher is our director. Everyone is on screen right now. Why don't we start with the new man in town, the CEO of Jaunt, Ted Rieck. Introduce yourself to everybody that's watching, sir.
Well, thanks, Jerry. Again, my name is Ted Rieck, Chief Executive Officer of Jaunt. I'm in charge of about 130 wonderful, dedicated transit professionals. We provide services in 6 counties, including the city of Charlottesville. And we serve a wide range of people for a wide range of purposes. And we're very proud of what we do. And I think we do a pretty good job at doing it so far that I've seen.
Well, welcome to Charlottesville. Welcome to Albemarle County. I think you were promised what in Central Virginia
70
here?
degrees and beaches, and so far I'm waiting for the 70 degrees.
So far he's gotten a snowpocalypse and one potentially to come. Supervisor McKeel, a reintroduction to you. By now I think you're a known commodity in this fantastic community.
Well, first of all, I would like to say happy birthday to Keith.
Oh, thank you.
Nicely done.
I understand.
So now you know the other reason why I had to sit next to me.
Flattery will get you everywhere with Keith Smith.
Totally. You just stopped there?
Yes, I'm Diantha McKeel. I am on the Board of Supervisors representing the Jack Jewett Magisterial District. I have been on the Board of Supervisors for 8 years, starting my 9th year, which is amazing to me to think about. I did represent the Jewett District on the school board for 16 years, which adds even more amazement to me, but it makes me feel very old. But anyway, and I am a retired school teacher and a retired nurse. Professionally, my background was nursing and education.
Fantastic.
And ended up in the political world many, many years ago because of an interest in health care that was happening in the public schools.
I always wanted to ask you that question. We see each other quite regularly, virtually these days. It's great to see you close and in person. But how did you make that transition? How do you make that transition from the medical field to the political field? I mean, that's a big transition.
Well, I think what happened quickly was that we still had smoking in our schools. 24, 25, well, 28 years ago. So.
Really?
And as a nurse, I was very concerned that smoking was taking place within the buildings. And so I joined...
In the classrooms?
Well, not in the classrooms,
okay.
but the teachers and the students.
Okay.
So, at the high school level. I mean, was in the buildings and on the grounds.
I think you had to be 18, right?
Yeah.
Or something.
Okay.
Or you were supposed to be 18.
I've spent in my life a lot of time in 2 different types of lounges, teachers' lounges and the nursing lounges. And in both places where I could go like this and cut the smoke.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Right. So I applied for and joined the Albemarle County Health Advisory Board because I wanted to deal with smoking in the schools. And one thing led to another, and I was elected to the school board and now ran for Board of Supervisors. But we did change the policy of smoking in the schools.
Thank goodness.
Took a long time, but
But that's a prime example how somebody can get involved.
Yes,
and
exactly.
make a difference, right?
Right.
You don't have to have a background
Right.
in
Right.
political science or whatever
Right.
the background. You can just say, hey, this was important to
Yeah.
me, and you got involved. Congratulations.
Yeah,
Good,
yeah.
good for you.
Then that was it. And I was lucky in that the supervisor that was representing the Jewett district at the time, Karen Powell, was appointed, and we were switching to elected, and Karen didn't want to run for election. And I said, well, if you're not going to, then
I'm in.
I will.
I'm in. So I was waiting for you to say, well, I've been doing all this to sit next to me and have a conversation about
definitely,
it. But
Keith,
I was
definitely.
trying to lead you along. You weren't following along at all, but that's okay. Ted, so tell us how you get from where you were to here, and how you become the CEO of Jaunt, and give us that little story.
Well, I mean, my most recent job was in Tulsa, doing a similar kind of a work. I was over the transit system in the Tulsa area,
Oklahoma,
and give you a sense of scale. Tulsa Transit is probably the size of Jaunt and CAT combined.
Okay.
I was kind of in the throes of thinking about retiring from Tulsa. I kind of met the requirements to do that. This opportunity came along. Charlottesville area is a desirable location to live and work. Even though Tulsa Transit is like CAT and Jaunt combined.
How so?
Well, on a budgetary basis, I think the combined budget of the two agencies is around $20 million. If you throw in UTS, it's probably a little higher than that. Tulsa's budget is around $25 million, but it's 4 times the population of Charlottesville. So on a per capita basis, you guys do a lot more for transit than Tulsa does.
Really?
Interesting.
Plus
That's a great stat.
That is interesting.
Plus your trajectory in terms of what you want to create a regional transit authority. I find that very exciting. Now, Tulsa wants to move in that direction too, but you guys are several years ahead, and that kind of got me excited about being able to help this community realize its transit aspirations. You've got a very good team of people already on the ground here, and hopefully I can be of help in shaping that and moving it forward.
I know you've only been in the seat for a pretty short period of time. How's the ridership between Tulsa and here? It sounds like we've got a more robust system based on size. It sounded like.
Well, I think you've got some really good advantages. I haven't looked at the actual numbers yet, but I think on a ridership basis, this area may be a little higher.
Really?
Because, you've got the university, you've got the city system. I think it's, if it's not the same, or it's very comparable.
So when Jerry and I go like really simultaneously,
I'm astonished by that.
But let me just ask, you're including UTS in that.
Yeah, he's including the students.
Yeah,
see,
I
and
would
that
think-
makes a difference in
yeah.
what we're thinking about.
College towns
Right.
are great for
Yeah.
transit.
Yeah.
So I think service to the grounds and the whole university area is a great asset and to be leveraged. So
I get to see Diantha regularly because I chair the Regional Housing Partnership, and I stalk her a little bit, but let's not talk about that. University of Virginia just announced its 3 sites for its affordable housing program. I sit on the community engagement team on that, and one of their locations was out in North Fork, right?
I'm pretty excited about the announcement.
Yeah, so
really
from your
cool.
perspective, I'd love to talk about that. From your perspective as a supervisor and as a transit provider, one of my concerns as a practitioner of real estate is how are folks going to get back and forth, right? That's pretty much out there. And the fact that made Jerry and I go, really, because we think of the transit system to need a little bit of help here. So can you talk a little bit about that from your perspective?
At first blush, I would just say, remember the old expression, build it and they will come.
Oh.
Sure.
So
Field of dreams.
there you go. Well, we don't have that transit worked out right now because we haven't had the housing built.
It's a chicken and egg thing.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So, but we do have, and I want to give you plenty of time to chat about this, but we right now have several groups working on transit in an Albemarle County transit program happening right now to study transit just within Albemarle County, right? And then we have a regional transit group working both under consultants, different consultant groups, and working on transit for the region.
Transit partnership.
And then, and some of that's flowing through the regional transit partnership. We're looking forward to Ted joining us for his first meeting this month. And so that work is in place right now. It's not completed, but, and we are certainly talking, both groups are looking at 29 North because in Albemarle County, that's where our population is located, right? And that's our population center. But so that's going to come, I guess is what I'm saying.
So we have questions coming in already for Ted Rieck.
Absolutely.
And we have we have 3 media outlets in town watching here. So this is a question that I think should be asked. How did you get recruited here?
Yeah.
How did you, what was your impression of Charlottesville and Albemarle County in Central Virginia, the recruitment process, and how do you persuade your wonderful better half to move basically across the country to this area?
Well, a couple of things. First of all, Jaunt hired a executive search firm, so I kind of worked through them to apply for the job. It's probably a very typical recruitment process. I just felt, looking at the statistics that I mentioned earlier, that Charlottesville area and the county just seemed to get transit. You want to do something with it in a way that many communities don't get it. So I thought that was a very exciting opportunity to do that. My wife, we were not from Tulsa or Oklahoma, so we didn't have any actual ties in the city or the state. So the decision to move to this area wasn't that difficult. And I came here for the interviews, and I brought my wife in for some some house hunting or whatever. And it's a beautiful area. You have a lot more trees than they do in Oklahoma.
Yes, we do. And we learned that about 10 days ago.
And a lot of them have fallen now.
I guess there's a downside to that, but no, it's a great community. We love the downtown mall, and the people have been incredibly friendly. Your great proximity to the mountains and to some major areas. We just realized you could take a train to D.C. or New York City, and my wife says, we're going to a Broadway show on the train. So I think...
So you're going?
Well, at some point we will. I don't know if they're open back up yet or not, but...
Ted, I can speak very highly of that. Yeah. My wife and I use the train regularly to go up to New York, as you can tell by my accent.
And give them your tip about the train.
Yeah, so, there's a couple of tips on the train. One, and talk about transit, right? That train route from Lynchburg to, I think it's the Northeast Corridor 171 up to Boston is super popular. Yeah. If you want to get on that train, you better book it a bunch of weeks in advance.
Really? Okay.
You just don't decide to do it a day or two ahead. And we do on the business thing, and it's only...
Business class.
Business class. Yeah. And it sounds fancy, but it's only like about $20-$30 more. Yeah. And what it is, it's a quiet car, right? So if you want to, that's what we do. We take our train up. Our daughter lives in Connecticut, and our grandkids in Connecticut. We take the train up there. It's a stop right in front of their town that they're in. You know, we love it. We go work on the way up, work on the way down. By the way, that's working.
And that's what we do too. Greg and I have done that numerous times. Not over the last couple of years, but up until the pandemic, we would.
But do yourself a favor. If you guys want to do it, book it in advance.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's good news.
And do get one of the private cars just because it's more comfortable and it's not hardly any. It's not very much more expensive at all.
Compared to flying.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Driving. You know, but
no, I'm saying the difference in the car in getting the car
the general admission versus the step up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like
only
$20.
About $30.
Yeah.
But they assign seats too now.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that.
Which helps.
Which helps quite a bit.
Okay, good.
So how about
we're on transit.
Yeah, we're on transit, and this is a fair question as well here. Obviously, we hope we're coming out of this pandemic. Still in the midst of it. How has the pandemic impacted transportation and transit? I would imagine you're the expert. I just have a microphone here. It's had quite an impact. Can you put it in perspective?
Well, I can't speak for Kat. I can speak for John and maybe what was happening in Tulsa and elsewhere. We've seen a decrease in demand for services. However, people still need to get to where they have to get to, medical appointments, jobs. So there is still a demand, but it's not as high as it was prior to the pandemic. And that is common all over the country. I think I just read recently that Denver, which has a phenomenal system, is going to a reduced service because they don't have enough drivers. And I'm not sure if the demand has recovered yet, but I think the industry in general is really trying to rethink, are we ever going to get these riders back? And what's the new normal going to be like? So I think that those are questions we need to be working with here as well.
So how is your driver situation going on?
It's awful. I mean, not only the pandemic has really tightened up the supply, and all the economic issues associated with
of drivers, you're referencing.
Of drivers,
yeah.
But there are more opportunities for people to be a driver. Even 5-10 years ago, if you wanted to drive, it was either a truck or a bus. Now you can drive your car and do Uber, you can do Lyft, you can do DoorDash, Amazon. There's all kinds of driving opportunities. So if you're in the market for a driver, if you want to be a driver, that's your aspiration, you've got lots of choices. So that makes us work harder at Jaunt to not only create a competitive wage rate, but also an environment that makes you want to be there because you're doing something really good for the community. And we find most of our drivers could do other things, but they value the service they provide to a very needed population and a population that very much appreciates what they do. I rode one of our routes a couple of weeks ago, and the relationship between the driver and the riders is very family-like. And they know each other's by their first name and their birthdays and anything else you want to know about it. So we have to work hard at Jaunt to create that family atmosphere that not only pays people a good wage, living wage, but also creates an environment that they feel appreciated and they know they're appreciated by what they do.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, to follow up with this, and I'm, excuse me, and I'm speaking of transit in general, not Jaunt specifically, but with every bad thing that happens, like a pandemic, there's also some good that can come of it if you take advantage of it, which sounds kind of wackadoodle. But we've been trying in this community to figure out for several years how to create transit as fare-free, right? That was the idea, was knowing that we needed it to be fare-free. And the pandemic and the changes and the money that we were able to receive through grants and all through the pandemic, we now have and can guarantee folks fare-free transit with CAT, and specifically I'm talking about, for 3 years, which to my way of thinking, if you're trying to find a little grain of
that's a positive.
Positives. Yeah. That's right. A little grain of hope here. That's really good because, of course, we're trying to get more people on those buses, and if they're not having to pay now, obviously it's not free. It's fare free because at the end of the day,
free to the customers, but you still have someone.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Still got to run.
But I'm just so that is one of the positives that I've seen come out of the pandemic.
Well, forces innovation.
And lots more, too.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So, yeah, you're absolutely right.
We have Neil Williamson, President, Free Enterprise Forum, with questions here. How important, and this is from Twitter, Neil, we love the engagement on Twitter here. How important is Farebox revenue to transit operations, which we're touching on right now?
Well,
go ahead.
In most communities, the fares is a relatively small part of the budget. In Tulsa,
CAT was a fraction of the budget.
Yeah, and it may cost more to collect the fare than actually what the rest. And I don't know if that's the case for CAT, but in Tulsa, for example, before I got here, it was like 15% of our operating cost, and was going down as a relationship to that. So transit does not pay for itself. It relies on subsidy from federal, state, and local sources.
So we call it a public utility?
Well, it's a public service.
Public service, yeah.
So, I mean, public utilities, I'm sure, make money or at least break even. So, but we do require other funding sources. And if you think about it, even the roadway cars require some kind of a subsidy, even though you're paying a gas tax. There are hidden subsidies there by, you know, the way utilities are priced and land uses are developed and things like that. So, so transit requires a subsidy as well.
So Ted, walk me through the process here. I live in Lake Monticello. It's a rural Savannah County. I want to use Jaunt to get to the studio or come into work. How does that process work? Do you guys do a point-to-point system still, or talk about how that works?
Well, we have a variety of service, but one of our main services is what we call door-to-door.
Okay.
And I think we have an eligibility requirements to do that, except in some areas, maybe like yourself, a general public could ride it as well.
Okay.
So we have a call center. You can come in and book your ride, and they'll say, where do you want to go, when do you want to go, and they'll see what the space is available and just book the trip for you.
So I think that's huge to talk about, right? You know, I'm a Brooklyn boy, so, you know, I was used to, you had a bus stop on the corner. If you caught the bus.
Our service is a little different. Now, CAT, you would go to a corner and take a bus stop.
A fixed route.
And you can use Google or other electronic media to see where that bus is and where you go. Ours is more of a reservation, what we call on-demand kind of a service. There are people who are unable to ride a fixed route, or the fixed route system isn't feasible in certain parts of the area. In a rural area or low density, fixed route doesn't do well because you need, like in Brooklyn, you need a lot of people going to a few places to make it really work. In many locations outside the city, on-demand service is the appropriate method to get people around.
So I'm going to be in the room in some conversations, particularly with UVA and Norfolk, and I'm struggling with this transportation component. It's just me personally on how I know this is the build it and they will come mentality. And but believe me, I've been through that. Sometimes it works really, really good.
We hope.
Well,
sometimes it really
hope
doesn't.
Hope is not a plan, and I get that.
No. Mrs. Smith will tell you how build it will come and how sometimes it might affect you. But the reality of it is, how are we going to make that connection happen? Right? I get it. We want to do the development. That's probably going to be their largest project, right? Because it's the most land, I would think, out on that end of it. And how is Jaunt and the rest of the transit folks partnership going to be able to help get folks from there to UVA and back? How does that work?
Great question.
Do you want to talk about the commuter service that we have?
Well,
We do have a commuter.
Yeah, you want to start off? Or?
You can go right ahead. And then
I mean, as you mentioned earlier, the pandemic has making us to be more creative in how we deliver services, and the market for transit has been changing over the last few years. So you need a variety of tools in your quiver to be able to deal with transportation issues. And in the city itself, fixed route like CAT is very appropriate. But as you go out, you need different kinds of solutions. So one solution is a commuter type service. We run a smaller type vehicle out in the suburban areas, Buckingham County, Crozet, those areas. And some of those can test the market. If we start to get really huge ridership, then we might go to a different kind of a vehicle and a different kind of a schedule. Right now we run pretty much a peak time, and we just like connect the dots. We start in Crozet and we get our people to the UVA grounds, and that's how it works. The on-demand, if those services weren't effective, could do the same thing, but since you've got people spread out and you got a lower demand, you can tailor your services to the demand, whereas on a fixed route, it's a little bit harder to do. So you try to use the different tools and techniques to the market, and if the market builds and takes off, then you can graduate to
like any other business model, right?
So we're always going to need fixed routes, right? That's the spine. But we're also going to need a combination of commuter services, which we have started to roll out right now and are going very strong and very positive. And we're also going to need an on-demand model. And think about then last mile, that is just like with a utility. So we want to encourage people to be able to ride their bike to wherever they want to get if necessary, or door to door. So then that's what the work that's happening right now is, to try and figure out what that's going to look like, right? And
most of the people who watch the show know what I'm about ready to say. Diantha, for sure. Ted, I'm going to try it out on you. I'm a recovering developer and builder, right? So I'm on my 10th step of my 12-step program, so there's help for me yet. So one of the things that my developer, builder, business brain is starting working on that end of it, it's just like if you go to Seattle or something like that, and they're putting a light rail line, and it's proposed to go out, excuse me, to wherever. Right? All of a sudden, all this development is going to happen around that, right? And I'm just trying to connect the dots with this Norfolk, because it's just really troubling to me on how we're going to connect the transit back and forth. So the way UVA is doing this, it's designated the property. It's going to do some lease scenarios thing with the developer, but they're going to send out an RFP. I believe it's an RFP, an RFQ, whatever they're calling it, out there. And I would think the developer who wants to do this, if I was doing it, I'd want to connect with transit folks and say, okay, I'm going to develop these 1,000 units, but I've also partnered with Jaunt. I've also partnered whatever. Do you see some partnerships like that developing with private sectors to kind of get this transportation component moving along? Is that a long?
No, go ahead. Sure.
Well, there are models like that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to
For example,
absolutely.
in Lansing, Michigan, and even Fort Collins, Colorado, I believe developers do work with the local transit systems and kind of bake into their lease models that if you lease an apartment from them, you'll get a bus pass along with it. And so the idea is to reduce the amount of parking requirements at the university and also make it an incentive, because students usually are not wealthy. So every dollar they can save can be helpful, especially if you're going to the campus, like in Fort Collins or what have you. So there are models out there where developers and the transit systems do work together to create a value proposition where both can benefit.
Yeah, my brain is just turning. I'm trying to figure out how you put these two things together and make this happen. I do believe in build it and they will come, but if you don't exactly bring them along with you, I'm not so sure how successful it is.
Well, and the reality is why I said that, Keith, is because what we have is we have a lot of proposals that come to us for new developments, and people say you can't do this because there's no transit. Well, there isn't any transit because there's no houses or any development, but once we get it, then we can provide you. That's where I was going.
So most people do not know this. I know you know this, Diantha, but to get some VDOT funding, you have to connect it to a subdivision. There has to be a rezoning. There has to be some sort of, and that's where the build it and they will come, and it's in the smart scale. In the smart scale system.
Boy, and that smart scale system that was developed has been the best. I would hope that we keep it.
Well, I was fortunate enough to be part of the first one done in this state out in Fluvanna County, and what a world of difference it was.
Huge impact in Fluvanna. This from a Crozet Community Advisory Committee member, Mark McKinney, as a question for Ted. How will the reduction of funding for operating assistance and grants impact the future of Jaunt? And he references something from the newspaper, Daily Progress. Jaunt owes the DRPT a little over $968K, and the agency will have a reduction of $430K in operating assistance for fiscal year 2022. The state is also canceling a grant for 23 light-duty transit vehicles that was awarded a $1.8 million in federal money and $361K in state money.
Well, I think it's not a news. Jaunt ran into some trouble in the last year and a half, and we're in the process of sorting all that out. I believe we're still in a good fiscal position to maintain our services. As I mentioned earlier, our demand for services are lower, but we're able to maintain some of our local funding at a level that will allow us to continue, at least for the time being, some of the services that are referenced. So we were able to pay back, we've already paid back the state the overage, and we've been able to handle that through using some of our reserves. The vehicles, for the time being, may not be a problem because with demand being down, The vehicles aren't being run as much, and therefore we're not hitting that useful life wall that we might have otherwise hit. But we still need to take a look at that. In the next year, we're going to be doing a 3 to 5 year plan to examine our services and where things are going and determine what does Jaunt kind of look like, and then what are our longer term needs. Yeah, we're working through that. At this immediate time, I don't anticipate that having an effect on our services, but longer term they might, but we're going to be assessing that and trying to figure out how to navigate around that.
Good answer right there. Follow-up question. Mayor Charlottesville was in Keefe's seat on Friday, Lloyd Snook, and he referenced the urgency or the prioritization of electric buses with CAT, and how this would be made a priority by Charlottesville City. Electric vehicles with Jaunt and the future of transportation.
Well, I happened to meet with Mayor Snook just yesterday, and we talked about that a little bit. I think there's some internal discussion as to whether you go electric now or use CNG kinds of vehicles.
What's CNG?
Compressed natural gas. It's also a low carbon footprint type of an operation, and the cost, if you were to use the equivalent gallon per gallon, they don't sell CNG by the gallon, but if you made the equivalent, it's like 1/3 the cost of diesel fuel. So it's a very inexpensive and low polluting technology. We had mostly a CNG fleet in Tulsa. We just acquired 4 electric buses. They have a range of about 175, 200 miles, and most transit buses will stay on the road a lot longer than that. So I think it will require some thought. This was my advice to the mayor. He didn't ask for it, but I gave it to him anyway. And the meeting just ended quickly after that. But I said it may be worth to do a study to take a look at that, whether the route system in Charlottesville would be amenable to an electric vehicle. Charlottesville actually operates smaller transit vehicles. Their vehicles are about 30 feet in length. The ones we operated in Tulsa were 35, 40 feet. And the technology for the larger vehicles in the 40-foot range is more developed, has longer range. When you get to the smaller buses, I understand the range of a vehicle is not as much.
It's just how much batteries it has.
How much batteries. Now, there are technologies to get around it. There's something called fast charging, where you could pull up to a location and I think 15, 20 minutes get recharged. Right. But those charging stations cost $1 million each.
Sure.
So you're going to have to think through what you want to do. I don't know if the city streets in Charlottesville can handle a 40-foot vehicle. I mean, they were designed by people riding horses and walking. I mean, really, Thomas Jefferson probably walked
we forget sometimes.
on Monticello Avenue or something like that. So I think we're going to have to think about the road geometry and the hills and the coldness and whether that technology makes sense. CNG may be a way, or maybe it's both. I did advise the mayor again. He was polite and didn't throw me out of his office immediately.
So you were down the hall?
Just down the hall, and I said, why don't you just form a citizens group, maybe a working committee to look at the issue and work it, because I know there are some strong proponents for electric, but I think it's something you need to really think through and weigh the pros and cons. Maybe you just get a couple of electric buses, test them out, because I don't think they're in a hurry to do fleet replacement right now, so maybe you can experiment. And there are special grants that you can get. We got the 4 electric buses in Tulsa using a special federal grant that paid for that, and maybe you could do the same thing here. So I think the jury is a little bit out on electric buses, but I think it is the future. And I think it's very wise to at least look at it and experiment with it, even here in Charlottesville.
And the technology is changing very quickly. So
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that what I've heard CAT express is concern that for the now and looking ahead 4 to 5 years when the technology is caught up, but the time it takes to build out the infrastructure and the expense when you're talking about 4 to 5 years, which is not 20 years, right? And looking at, then you end up in 4 to 5 years with perhaps an infrastructure that
has to be redone.
That then you find yourself saying, oh, well, we already have this infrastructure. We certainly couldn't go back and switch to another. You know what?
It's like this. It's like this iPhone.
Yeah.
Right?
So
4 to 5 years, electric can look completely different. Is
well,
what you're saying.
and what I'm saying is that California's moved to CNG 20, 25 years ago as a bridge. I'm not sure, and I'm just speaking for Diantha, right? But I'm just not sure that that bridge, we don't have that 20 to 25 years because the technology is changing very quickly. But I think your idea of piloting a few vehicles and seeing how they do makes a lot of sense.
Now, we have some electric vehicles, but I don't think we're using them very much at Jaunt, and I'm not sure why or how that came about. So, again, the smaller vehicles at this time are not as robust and have the range that a bigger vehicle does because the battery sizes are different and that kind of thing.
Something that will be helpful, though, I think will be interesting, the Albemarle County Public Schools have committed to several electric school buses. Now, they're not on here yet because the funding doesn't happen until July 1. They're hoping to have them by the start of school. It'll be interesting to see how those electric school buses operate in our community. That'll be maybe.
But I think their routes are a little shorter. I think I may be wrong, but
well, it would depend.
Yeah, some of those routes are pretty robust.
Well, now the routes for Charlottesville school buses system.
I got it.
Yeah, that's the Charlottesville Public Schools. I'm talking about the county.
Yeah,
and our buses drive 14,000 miles a day.
Oh my God!
The county
that's the whole fleet, though, right?
That's our whole fleet. But I'm just saying
divided by
that. Yeah, but we're driving. You know, so it's a pretty robust system, and we're going out into the county and flat. So it'll be interesting to see how those electric buses perform once they're online. You know, that'll be something to look at.
So while we're staying on electric EVs, Jerry and I have been debating this for probably 100 shows or 200 shows on how the advancement of EVs, electric vehicles, and the reduction of their price is going to impact the housing industry, is going to impact how folks are going to buy and sell homes. Because, you know, if you look at the C&T model that I sent out to everybody, where you can price, where you can put in a zip code and it tells you this is what your average transportation cost is, this is what your housing cost. Because transportation costs, if I lived out in Fluvanna County or in Waynesboro or whatever, is a big part of getting back and forth.
And it erodes your savings that you got from home ownership purchase. You may get something more affordably 30 to 40 miles from the epicenter of employment, but you're eroding that savings and wear and tear in the vehicle, and even more importantly, the opportunity cost of your time.
Oh, absolutely.
So I'm hung up on this North Fork, and I just plugged in that zip code into this as you guys were chatting. So the housing cost is 35%, and the transportation is 19%. So the total between housing and transportation on average is 53% of folks' income.
Right.
Well, there's a group called the Center for Neighborhood Technologies. Is that what that is?
That's exactly what that is.
I think they have a threshold. If it's over 40%, that same metric,
sure.
40, 43%, then you're in a difficult situation. I don't know what Charlottesville is, but Tulsa is like around 50%. Ironically, places like New York and D.C. are I think, below 40%, and they're notorious for being expensive places to live. So I think that's important because we always think about transit users as people without cars, but there's a group of people who have a car because they have to have a car. And they have to choose between, do I pay the rent, do I get food for my kids, or do I keep the car on the road? And a $400 or $500 bill on a car sets these people back. So transit can provide an opportunity to eliminate that issue and give people an opportunity to build wealth, to buy the houses that they're selling. And I think that's the message that transit can do for people, not only the environment, but give people an opportunity to build wealth. And that's a story that I don't think is told very much in our industry.
And that's kind of why I brought it up, and it's kind of where I wanted to go, and I sent out in our pre-show email that link, and Jerry's going to drop it in there. It's super important because we're having these real world at people's dining room tables. Hey, look, I have a job at UVA. I can't afford in Charlottesville. I can't afford in Crozet. I'm looking at Waynesboro, the Tree Streets, or whatever it is, but I don't know how much my vehicle cost, how much of my fuel costs. I plug in the zip code in this, and on an average, it'll tell them. And because most folks, when they buy homes, they're not looking at interest rates. They're not looking at this as how much home can I afford for my monthly budget, right? How much can I afford for my utilities? How much I can afford for my transportation? So what is the zip code here, Jerry?
22902.
Yeah. So that's 22902. I'll plug that in. So that this would be what the Charlottesville number is?
22902 and 22901,
Yeah.
for the most part, are the urban area, in the city and the
That's
urban
right.
area.
That's right.
So it's-
01 and 02.
So 02, interesting, 54% of the total income goes to housing and transportation. It's really, it's kind of balanced. 28% is on housing and 26% is on transportation. It's because most folks are going from downtown where we sit here to go to UVA or wherever they're going.
A better one would be if you went Crozet to here. Or 22947, which is a zip code you know well. How about 22947 to here? Try 22947.
Yes, sir.
Because you're looking at about a 25 minutes, you would say, Ted? To
Yeah,
here?
I think so.
Yeah, 22947.
So that's out 250
That's we'll call Eastern Albemarle County.
250 East.
Yeah, 62%, 37% on housing, 27% on transportation. If I got that right.
So what's that? The wheels are turning over there, Ted. I see. What's on the brain right there when you hear these numbers?
Well, no, I just, they sound about right. I mean, I don't dispute those numbers at all. But it does point that for some groups, public transit could be a good option. When we're talking about creating living wages and affordable health care and all these kinds of issues that are on top of people's mind, public transit can be part of the solution. And I think, policymakers should be looking at transit not as an expense, but as an investment in the community to making people's lives better.
And I, with all due respect, I do.
That is why this pretty lady is.
But you are woke.
I think you do a great job of that.
But so I just want to say that from the viewpoint of I am so thrilled that UVA chose North Point as a stake in the ground for affordable housing, because I look at that area as bringing people home. It will allow folks to come out of some of the surrounding counties
Back inward.
back in to where the jobs are, and offer them opportunities to stop driving, because it will put wind beneath our wings to put transit out there, more commuter services, right? And I just think it's a win-win, and I am thrilled. And while it seems like to some folks they're going way up 29 North, that is exactly where we need some of that, so we can bring people home.
Well, that's why it was so important for you to be here today, because I have conversations coming up, and I kind of wanted to tap into that beautiful brain of yours and see what information I can bring. I plugged in Fluvanna County, 22963, which I've been there since 1987. Interesting. 24% of it is on housing. You want to take, on housing. On transportation is 30%.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Try Buckingham County.
Somebody's going to have to give me a zip code on Buckingham.
I'll find that zip code on Buckingham County. It is important to emphasize with Buckingham County that pre-pandemic, the University of Virginia, for employees that were working at UVA, had a drop spot.
Yes.
Where UVA was shuttling employees from Buckingham to Buckingham, to UVA.
They had a park and ride there.
Well, John had that service going back and forth, and it has been one of the most popular commuter services that John has run for us from Buckingham. Right.
That's a high-need area, so I'm curious what that percentage.
Yeah, so Buckingham County is 23921 zip code, 23921. I would imagine the percentage is maybe the highest in the footprint of Central Virginia, Buckingham County. What do you got there, Keith Smith?
I'm working on it, sir.
23921.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Is it flirting with 40%?
Well, it's 44% of total income only 19% is on housing, 25%
Yeah.
is on transportation.
Because they have to
See,
travel
that's
so
what
far to get a
happens.
job.
And people
Yeah.
really don't think about that when they're saying, oh, well, I'm going to go to where the housing is less expensive.
Right.
And they move to these areas, and then all of a sudden.
Well, we talk about trusted
Yeah.
advisors all the time
Yeah.
on the show, and that's why you have to hire a trusted advisor to help.
Yeah.
Because if they're saying, well, hey, I mean,
Right.
I can't do the math as quickly as in my
Right.
head, but if I'm out in Buckingham County and I'm paying $225,000 for a home or $175,000 for a home, but my transportation is this, and if you can say, look, if you can spend a little bit more and get a little bit closer, here's
You'll
the math.
save long term.
Here's the math. Here's the math on. Here's the math on that. So this calculator, this product is a useful tool to help folks figure it out. And you can actually break it down by, how much gallons. It's a pretty neat little program.
Kelsey's watching the program. She lives in your district, Supervisor McKeel. Kelsey, we love when you participate and ask questions on our shows. Thank you kindly. This is a good question. How do you determine locations for Jaunt from a pickup drop-off standpoint? Is it associated with density, and how do you consider adding new ones to Central Virginia?
Well, Jaunt is primarily an on-demand service, so we're going to come to your place of residence and take you to your destination. So we don't really worry about stops per se. Now, we do have a couple of commuter routes, and what we try to do is figure out the most efficient route to get from point A to point B. And we look for locations along that route where it's safe to stop and there's some density there. So it's not an exact science, but we do try to match. So if there's an apartment building, along the route, we'll put a stop there as opposed to an empty field or where probably would not have as much demand. So it's kind of looking at land use and those things.
Here's a follow. I think what's happening here is and I'm also in this ballpark. There is perhaps a bit of confusion between the dynamics of Jaunt and Charlottesville Albemarle Transit and
right,
CAT.
and CAT.
So
That's
maybe
right.
we need to identify the
Right.
dynamics there, how
Right.
they complement each other and how they are different, Jaunt
Okay.
and CAT.
Well, CAT is primarily a fixed route system, which means you look on a map, you know where the route's going to go. You consult a schedule. It tells you when the bus is going to arrive at a certain location. It's a very good system, and it has frequencies, a bus every 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, depending upon the bus route. And therefore, you match your travel needs to the schedule. So if you need to get downtown and you live in southern Charlottesville, you try to figure out which route will get you there in time. So it may or may not be convenient depending on the frequencies of
But
the
that's
route.
a traditional model.
Yes.
The
That's
model you
traditional.
have, and that's the reason I wanted to talk about this
Right.
point to point. Jerry and
Yeah.
I's chemistry is working because that's literally where I was going to go next. I'm out in Buckingham County. I'm inverted on what I'm paying for transportation versus housing. How can you help me? How can you help me change those numbers? How does that process work?
Well, I think if we can get people to use the transit, we can lower that transportation factor
Sure.
significantly. Even though you're paying a fare for the bus, when you add it all up, the cost of riding the bus for lower economic people especially is a good deal. And by freeing up that money allows you to make other decisions in your life about maybe getting a better house, maybe better food, because there's food deserts everywhere. So if you're able to afford fresh vegetables and fruits,
It's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good thing. It has good health outcomes.
Sure.
So that's why transit's an investment, not an expense. So if we can put it in areas where people actually need it, or high cost areas, we can lower that threshold and give people better choices in their lives and make better communities, I think.
Overall, this housing envelope we talk about really requires four kind of high level pillars to it. It's your health, your education, your transportation, and then the housing industry on the end of it. You can't have one without all the others coming together. But I think it's important to get out there that you know, if you live out in Buckingham County, you know, there's help, right? And they need to reach out to you guys via your website or a phone number, and I'm sure we'll drop that in there. There's help that you can help. I think part of the let's just call this what it is. We as Americans are car-centric, right? I think part of what would have to be helpful here is hiring a really good PR and marketing company to help try to start changing some of that mentality, because that's part of it. You get this, it's the reason why EVs aren't happening. You get this range anxiety, right? I'm going to run out of charge, right? Or, hey, if I'm coming into town today to work, but I got to go to the doctor's, how does that work? And how do I get back home?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And more points being made on very good questions. I find transportation fascinating. Evidently, the viewers and listeners, Tad, find transportation fascinating, which makes you smile. I can see right there. Here's a follow-up question from Thomas. Is the future of transportation bus stop-based or on-demand appointment-based?
Both. Sorry.
Oh, I like that. Perhaps Supervisor McKeel, what's the answer right there?
Did you see me throw my voice? I answered my next act.
So sorry.
Go ahead, Supervisor McKeel.
No, I'm just saying it has to be a mix.
Yes. Okay.
We both agree with that. I mean, it's like many things. There has to be a balance, and not one service is going to work in every situation. So we're going to have what I call the spine, fixed routes, and then we're going to have a mix of on-demand, which is that I think of Jaunt as an on-demand model. And there are other forms of on-demand, but it's going to take both. And that's what we're looking at in this community right now. And then you mix into that the commuter services for people that need to leave in the morning and come home in the evening.
But
so
we're
it's going to take
talking
all
about
of
the
that.
technical end of things,
Yeah.
right? How to connect the dots. What I'm talking about is how do we change the mindset? My wife is from Austria.
Of riding public transportation.
Riding transportation.
I grew up, right.
Yeah, my wife lives in a rural part, from a rural part in Austria that there has not been a house built in 250 years. The brewery celebrated 750 years. I can come out of my mother-in-law's home, get on a bus, get to a train, high-speed train, and be in the airport and never put myself in a car.
Ted is the expert. I would imagine how you would change the mindset, or the stigma is making it more consistent and reliable.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the holy grail of transit, is how do you change minds. I think people value convenience, and it goes to your point earlier about land use.
Yeah.
If you have a suburban type development that is not conducive to transit, you can't just step out and, like you say, and board a bus on a high-speed train. You need a denser land use pattern. Are Americans open to living next to each other in condos and row houses? I don't know. That's a big change.
This is right up Neil Williamson's alley, who's commenting here, and you can imagine Supervisor McKeel what he's commenting right here about expanding the growth area and increasing density.
Well, and I would say increasing density, and we certainly are trying to do that in our development area, but lots of pushback from the residents.
Well, we're talking missing middle, right? And
That's
we're
right.
talking
That's
increase
right.
in density
That's right.
and
That's right.
reforming the
And NIMBYism here.
And I understand their concern. Change is hard,
of course.
but we have a development area. 5% of our Albemarle County is development area.
For residential and commercial.
And for residential and commercial. Yeah. And I will remind Neil that we have practically abandoned shopping centers right now. So
we know one really big one.
So when we talk about expanding the development area, let's fill up those abandoned shopping centers and some of these other areas first.
That's a fair counterpoint right there. That's a very fair counterpoint.
It is, but you know, not to board Ted with the red tape, green tape conversation. But you have to make this.
Is this where you reference the 24% number?
Something.
The cost of a new home, 24% of it is associated with red tape? Is that what you're going to say?
No.
Because our chemistry is working right here.
No. I'm just going to drink coffee. But no, it's Shenandoah Joe's coffee, our favorite kind here.
Dave Fafara.
So, yeah, look, so these things are if it was simple, I have our magic wand, right? Poof, please fix it, and it's done. It doesn't work that way. Life isn't done that way. This particular subject is super complicated to go ahead and do that. But, Diantha, I think the struggle here is if we are committed to turning red tape into green tape and developing the growth areas, like you guys are, there's a couple of reasonably large projects that has recently been approved, which then will help Jaunt's transportation thing, because you need bodies to do transportation. This is the build it and it'll come process on that end of it. But I just think it needs to be a little bit bigger, and a little bit more holistic in that end of it. I don't know, Ted, am I babbling, or does this make any sense?
Those are good points.
Yeah.
So, my role here, and my role sitting on some of the boards and commissions I sit on with Diantha, is how do we make this conversation a reality, right? How do we get from what we're talking about to actually creating the place, right, the communities, and how do we get the medical, and how do we get the folks from that point to work? It seems we fall apart at that point. We have all these great plans and all these great concepts, but the implementation of it, that's why I keep on pointing to a great marketing and sales team here. It seems it's just the sales job to the public just needs to be better.
I don't think sales is the right word. I think it's branding. Managing the perception. We're talking branding.
This is your world.
Yeah.
So.
And obviously the man's wheels are turning here. He wants to jump in with something.
Oh, no. The Edsel had a pretty good marketing program. And so did New Coke.
Coke Zero?
This
Vanilla Pepsi?
This is 1980s New Coke. And maybe Diantha know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So, I think... I
think he's talking about my age there. I think that's what he was saying right there.
I think you got to have the need has to be there. For example, I was doing some work in Chapel Hill, which in some ways has some similarities to Charlottesville.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And we did some modeling, and the best bus service barely increased ridership. When we went from a bus every 10 minutes to a bus every 1 minute. It didn't have a significant impact on ridership. What has an impact on ridership is convenience, travel time.
Yeah,
consistency. So if it becomes harder to get somewhere, you'd rather take the bus than drive, like to New York.
So this is why I like your on-demand concept, and that's the reason why I wanted to talk a little bit more about it, because I don't think a lot of people know it's out there, right? This on-demand concept, because it kind of takes that anxiety of, okay, I've got to schedule my day. So I talked about how great it was from my mother-in-law's home in this place that literally hasn't changed in hundreds of years on it. But your life is built around, okay, I've got to schedule the bus here. So out of your normal work day or your normal day, you're spending a ton of time planning your travel, right? Which is fun when you're on vacation. It's fun when you're going to visit. But if we're going to do an 8, 10, 12-hour day and several hours of it is planning, I think that's a little bit of the anxiety. And maybe that's from my perspective. I don't know if that makes, you have a perplexed look on your face. Maybe.
The technology has advanced so much. If you can use Google Maps and plan out your trip on transit. I think it's here in Charlottesville, but we had it in Tulsa for sure. Again, point A to point B, can I get there on transit? And if the system is set up right, Google Maps will tell you where to walk to catch the bus, when is the next bus going to arrive, how long is it going to take you to get to your destination, and you got to walk again.
I'll tell you it works here because I use it when I bike around town.
Okay.
So it works.
I haven't had a chance to check it out, but if you say it does, it does. So.
It does.
Supervisor McKeel?
I was just going to say that's one of the things that we have talked about a lot at the Regional Transit Partnership is how to get our transit services and to make sure that while everybody has different systems, technology systems to control, that for the user just goes to one.
It's seamless.
And it's seamless for them. And that's been, in the past, has been a struggle. I think we're getting there. But it's critical that I, as a rider, don't have to go to 3 or 4 apps and 3, Well, and we're much closer to that than we were at one point.
That leads me to something that, is on the brain here. If we had better, maybe better is not the right word, more efficient economies of scale, with transportation locally. I mean, we have CAT, we have UTS, we have Jaunt, we have a number of options. What if they were...
So we have 5 transit systems.
Okay.
This is getting to my home turf. We have 5 transit systems in this community.
What if it was one brand, one umbrella?
We have 2 student transportation systems, which cross each other daily, going and back and forth, picking children up.
This seems not super efficient here.
It doesn't seem, I've been saying this now for 3 or 4 years, I'm just saying. And then we have UTS, and we have CAT, and we have Jaunt. That's 5 separate transportation systems in this community. So what would it look like if we had everybody under
one umbrella, one brand?
Right, and that was where we were sort of trying, at least where I was going with the development of the Regional Transit Partnership, to get everybody at the table. We have both people transportation systems, and we have everybody, the other 3 at the table, and that's where we need to go.
Like
and
a Central Virginia transportation system.
Well, now you're talking about probably an authority.
Well,
that sort of brings you to perhaps the discussion around an authority.
How does an authority fit into your wheelhouse, Ted?
Well, I like the idea. I think at some point, Jaunt and CAT, maybe UTS should be under one umbrella.
One umbrella, anyway.
Yeah.
And we can spread our overhead costs over a larger base, and that's more efficient, I think, and we can coordinate a lot better. I think that is the future. Now, the MPO, the Thomas Jefferson Planning District, will be studying how you might do that. Sure. So I may be foreshadowing something that may not happen or not, but I think it's worth looking at.
Well, I'm a little partial to that since I've been on it for 10 years.
And I will say that right now, Ted's right, we're looking at it, the Thomas Jefferson Planning District, right? That we're going to be looking at what that governance model might look like. That's the first step. Is because we have all of these 5 systems right now, and we have all these communities. What would the governance model look like if we were to move to an authority? So and I can't speak to that right now because I don't have a clue.
But you've been around the country and seen different organizations. Does that model, you think that model will work?
Well, that can work, and there are other models too. Like you talked about the branding thing in Kansas City, for example. They have 3 or 4 transit systems, but they're under one brand called Ride KC. Got it. And they have a unified paint scheme and logos and all that, but they're separate jurisdictions that run different pieces of it. So
Ride KC, I don't want to assume here, you have better purchasing power, you have better influence with grants or state money or funding, you have better digital infrastructure, better marketing power.
Well, I can't speak to all those details, but they do have unified marketing. I think there is a regional call center, so if you live in one jurisdiction, you can one call, one click to get the information you need. They have a mobile fare app on your phone that you can pay, and I think it works on all the different systems.
But also from a human resources perspective, it's a lot easier with
that's
the
called
large.
Well, I was going to say, and from my viewpoint as an elected official, I've been playing whack-a-mole with the school division and with county government in transit for years about Charlottesville raises their salaries for their bus drivers. Then Albemarle, we are just constantly playing whack-a-mole.
Well, and then people are jumping.
That just happened.
And people are jumping back and forth. If we could get an authority or everybody under one umbrella, we could have the same salary scale. We could be paying people the same.
So what's the big hang-up?
And so,
well, she's talking governance.
I'm talking governance, right? And how do we get everybody at the table to agree to this? Yeah. That discussion is going to start happening, and I am so excited.
Well, there's a law on the books from the Virginia legislature that allows that. Sure. Personally, I think that law needs to be
updated,
strengthened.
Mm-hmm. How so?
But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that we in 2004. Albemarle County and the city went to the General Assembly and said, we need, it's the Mother May I Dillon Roll piece, but we need permission to establish a transportation authority. We were given that authority, but that was in 2004. So what Ted is talking about is that enabling authority needs to be looked at from the viewpoint of 2022 and how it might change, and then we need to look at what the governance structure would look like. And I'm sorry, I think I interrupted you.
What you said is great. And My quick review of that legislation, I don't believe there's a funding mechanism included in there now.
It's not, there's not.
If there is, it escaped me. So that needs to be addressed, even if it requires some sort of a referendum of voters to do that. There's bonding authority in there, but there's no way to pay for the bonds.
And that's why we
got to look at
failed
stuff like
last
that.
time. In 2004, we got the ability, and the Charlottesville and Albemarle were at the table, and where it fell apart was, where do the funds come from?
Yeah.
And at about that time that we were there, that was in 2006 and 2007. I was on the school board, but having said that, the players were at the table, and then the recession hit. And they said, we certainly can't fund it now, and they all walked away.
So would a Central Virginia transportation system, and if it's just even branded that, need the supervisors from all jurisdictions to come into one room and agree on this? Or is this associated with Dillon Rule and Richmond?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
So
For us, go ahead.
So what he's asking, will the state allow the 6 jurisdictions
To do this?
To do this?
Well, you already have it.
We have it. That's what we did. In 2004, we were given the authority.
Okay.
Right, the two.
Well, but you have it even better than that. Jaunt is a multi-jurisdictional agency.
Already.
So if we wanted, we could even change Jaunt's name to Central
Right.
Virginia
Transportation
thing.
system.
Right. But we have to get the
My
leaders.
marketing person is saying, "Oh God, no."
But what we have to do is we have to get the
Makes you
leaders in the
valuable.
jurisdictions to agree that this is what they want to do.
But the structure is
But
there.
the structure's there.
We can
Yeah.
get there if
Yeah.
we wanted to.
Yeah.
So to answer the question is that the state has already given you permission to do this. We just
Right.
haven't done it
Right.
yet.
Now, we do think, and I
Goodness
think
gracious,
Ted's
does anyone
right.
know this?
I think
They do
Ted's
now.
correct in that our ability to do it needs to be looked at again through the lens of, this is 20 years later. right?
Yeah.
And so how have things changed, and how do we need to update that? And
Well,
that may need to go back. I don't know.
Sometimes-
It may need to
Sometimes the
go
old
back.
law may be more in favor because it's got a little bit
Well,
lighter.
I can explain now in a nutshell how things are changed. The cost of housing has never been more expensive.
Yeah.
Fuel costs has never gone higher. And how about the cost of new vehicles? We've never seen
Oh, yeah.
a
If you
higher
can get
price.
'em.
If you can get them.
Get 'em, yeah.
I mean, good night. You know what? And this puts in perspective. I have a 2020 Ford Explorer. I went on one of the online sites, and they appraised it digitally for me. I can sell the 2020 Ford
And make
Explorer
money.
for $5K more than I bought it for right now. And I drove it for 18 months. Think about that. So how would that impact public transportation, potentially, the cost of vehicles essentially being unattainable now, and if you can get them, like you said?
Yeah, I haven't looked at the pricing of transit vehicles lately. I know they've been going up a lot, especially if you want to buy the new technologies like electric and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, pivoting demand to your service and away from vehicles because
they're
they're so
expensive.
unattainable.
Well, there's probably other ways to get around it, but yeah, that would be a challenge. I
Yeah,
don't
so
have a
the
great-
reality of that, Jerry, is that your ridership probably isn't buying brand new vehicles, right? They're buying used vehicles.
I see what you're saying.
Right, and then not only is it the vehicle purchase of it, it is I got to put fuel in it. I've got to put. That's where this whole 24-30% of ridership cost is coming from. When you take a dive into those numbers, oh my God, the tranny just went on me, right? And I don't have that money to replace that. At some point, I want to get back to the merger conversation because I personally have some experience about this on an affordable housing thing. So, but I think that's the point Jerry was trying to.
Yeah, that is the point
yeah.
that I was trying to make there.
Yeah.
Stephen Johnson, watching on the Jaunt page, says maybe we should call it the Charlottesville Area Regional Transit, then we can ride around on go-karts. That's how he said. Charlottesville Area Regional Transit, CART, go-karts. You're very much appreciated by the viewers and listeners here watching the show. They said they find you fascinating. So what are some of your short and long-term goals for Jaunt?
Well, I don't know how long I'm going to be there, maybe 3 to 5 years, but I would like to get us to the Regional Transit Authority.
Right.
That's what's really kind of
That's
drove me here. Whether it's a merger or some sort of a unified branding, I don't know what that will be, but I think my goal is to do that. Short-term goal for Jaunt is we need to restore confidence in our ability to manage and and operate service. It's been kind of hurt a little bit in the last year or two. It's a great staff. They don't deserve to have gone through what they have gone through, and we need to get through that, and people need to see them for what they are, a fantastic group of people. So that's kind of my short-term goal.
So his long-term goal with an authority, right, is exactly why the Regional Transit Partnership was formed. So we have it set up right now. We just have to figure out how we're going to get it done.
And the pieces are there to make it happen.
That's right.
For example, like CAT, they rely on the city for administrative support, HR, legal. Jaunt already has that stuff. So by bringing these together, we can leverage, CAT can leverage our admin infrastructure, and we already have the beginnings of a merged system.
So I can tell you this works. I chair the Regional Housing Partnership. How long has the Transit Partnership been around?
I would say 4 years.
Yeah, so we kind of created it around the same time. I also chair the Piedmont Community Land Trust, and we are in the middle of merging with Piedmont Housing Authority. And this goal was set up several years ago, to about a year and a half ago, to get through this, because we as the land trust realized we couldn't grow, we couldn't solve as much issues alone. We needed to partner with somebody who was larger than us and merge, and bringing in fiscal resources, human resources, and I can tell you our ability to help people just during this merger process as a 1-year kind of dating period, for lack of a better term. On that end of it, we're helping people hand over fist that we couldn't help before. So the point is, it can be done. And not only that, we have other housing providers reaching out to us, how do we join? So I think if you can start with 2 and get a merger started, it'll...
proof of performance.
There you go.
There's your pop.
So I'd like to get back at some point, and I don't know how much time we have.
We have a few more minutes.
I'd love to get back to the marketing piece just for a minute, because you could have the greatest marketing plan in the world, with all due respect, Keith, but if my constituents drive down the road and they see a CAT pole in the ground with no pad and no shelter and no bench to sit on, they're going to say to themselves,
why would I do this?
In the rain, when the rain coming down, they're going to drive by and say, boy, I'm glad I don't have to ride a bus to work today.
But Diantha,
And so the best, there are structures and things we're working on right now to get in place that...
I mean, it seems common sense. Let's put a roof and a bench
exactly,
on a bus stop.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that's what I've been working on for the last 2 years, and that's what makes the on-demand Jaunt piece more appealing.
Definitely.
And it's great because they're door-to-door.
Right.
But we have to have a fixed route service as well to work. All of this works together. And for our fixed route, we can't have people standing in the mud, in the rain, in the hot sunshine, and we're trying to solve that right now.
That's
well
why
said.
That's why this merger is so important, right? You merge resources, you merge abilities to go ahead and function. That's why in the corporate world it's done. 2 entities come together.
And I will tell you, the problem we have in the county is that, and this is a longer discussion, but the problem we have in the county is that all of our roads are controlled by VDOT.
Sure.
And so to get shelters on and pads on our roads in the county, and I'm talking urban ring here, the shelters go on VDOT right-of-way.
Yeah.
So we've been working now for 2 years to get VDOT and CAT together on how we can make that happen. And I'll be honest with you, while I've spent an enormous amount of time on it, I don't have a vote in that because I'm Albemarle County, and what we need to do is to get CAT and VDOT together. That is work. They're working on it right now, and I think it's going to happen. But that has been the...
Well, that's an important point, and thank you for making it.
That's a very important point.
You know, you can have this great partnership together and everything can function, but if VDOT won't allow you to put bus shelters on that...
Right. That's right. So we're getting there. But, and I have to say, about 3 or 4 years ago, it was a light bulb went off in my head, and I said, wait a minute, I keep fussing about no shelters on my urban ring VDOT roads, and the reason is because no one's gotten CAT and VDOT together to make that happen through the bureaucracy.
100%.
And VDOT has a process We have just not been working the process right. And I just had a Zoom meeting last week. We're having multiple conversations because I keep saying if we keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, it ain't going to happen.
I think that's called the definition of insanity.
Right,
that is
exactly.
the definition. We have Sean Tubbs, the fantastic journalist on the feed, referencing the show and asking questions. Neil Williamson. Do you know Neil Williamson yet?
No.
You will.
Yeah, get ready. We love you.
Do I want?
Yeah.
Do I want to know him?
No, he's a good guy. He's watching.
Yeah,
He's a great guy.
Sorry, Neil.
He's the president of the Free Enterprise Forum. He does want to know him, right? Jody says yes. She says yes, offset over here. You're doing a hell of a job. I sincerely mean you're doing a hell of a job because I don't think you knew.
I'll probably need a new job after this.
No, you're doing a hell of a job. I don't think you had any idea what you were getting into here when you came here. All right, let me throw this. This is from Neil, and this is a good point. He says the Charlottesville Albemarle Regional Transit Authority (RTA) was established by the Virginia General Assembly in 2009 by HB 2158. However, a bill to allow Charlottesville and Albemarle County residents to vote on a proposed sales tax increase to fund the operations did not pass.
Yeah.
And I thought it was 4, but maybe we started working on it in 4.
So
Thank you,
Ted,
Neil.
That's the reason you want to know Neil.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
He's
And so
good.
is
He's a
Sean.
fine person, obviously.
Why don't we do this? No, you are a good guy.
Well played.
I like this guy quite a bit.
Yeah.
All right, why don't we close with some final thoughts? And ladies first, Supervisor McKeel, anywhere you want to go with some final thoughts.
I just really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk transit. And
It's
as
fun.
I say
Yeah.
lots of times to folks, the wheels of the bus go round and round,
There we go.
round and round.
The former teacher, right?
That's right.
The former
exactly,
teacher
right.
and former nurse. I didn't know that.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk about transit, and if I've misspoke with anybody, I apologize. But I'm enjoying the community and the staff at Jaunt, and I hope we can do great things in the near future.
Well, I'm thankful you're here. I'm thankful you're bringing a perspective from other areas and grow. The really that Jerry and I did was like, really? That you think that we're better off than Tulsa? So, that's a really. I would encourage this merger very much so. Diantha, I'll see you in about an hour and a half.
Yeah, that's right.
And we're gonna do exactly what we talked about. We're gonna get a bunch of people together and try to tackle a big problem.
And
So
if you have 2 minutes or 2 seconds,
Yeah,
let me
sure,
just say that
sure.
the next meeting of the Regional Transit Partnership, we're going to have a conversation with Blacksburg. And we have representatives from Blacksburg, and we're going to be on a Zoom about their transit system, which is a much more centralized, the university and the city work together on their transit. So we're going to be talking about that model and asking them questions. So we're going to be rolling out different communities to talk to. And I recognize it's Zoom because we can't go in person, but.
Anything else, Steve?
No, thank you, Diantha, for doing
Yeah,
this. I
sure.
think the world of you. I know transport is super, super important. Ted, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to the neighborhood, and just let us know when you get it all
Literally,
fixed.
welcome to the neighborhood. Literally.
Yeah, your neighborhood.
right.
Judah Wickhauer is our director. Keith Smith, Diantha McKeel, Ted Rieck. My name is Jerry Miller. This is Real Talk on the I Love CVille Network. We're back with the I Love CVille show in 55 minutes, guys. Thank you kindly for joining us. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. It was fun.